All right, students, this is my final video on how to do a DBQ. Remember, the best thing you can do to review for the DBQ is to go look at those two examples on Canvas announcements. Those are two the College Board released last week, and they are two high-level, highly professional AP Euro teachers showing you how to do them. So that's a DBQ you can try and then go through and see if you would get the points. For you lit kids, of course, you don't really have time left to do that, but for you juniors and sophomores, you have hours before this thing starts. But let's make sure we get this right. Here's this thing I came up with. I doubt it printed very well, but here is your introduction. And it ends with your point, which is your thesis. Remember, this you're arguing with this essay, and you can't argue unless you have a point to make. So at the top goes contextualization. Now remember, that is what happened before. That's the best way to do it. What happened before your topic. And where I want you to get your facts from is from this thing I sent you, this outline. And look over here on the left. Remember, your contextualization has got to do with the area you're talking about, the region of the empire, and the topic. So you see these categories on the left. If you can't print this out, and I imagine it's not going to print very well, at least have it nearby on a device that you can access it. These categories are Sprite, social. So if you have a social essay, you can go over here, look in a time period, and it gives you countries and everything. So everything you need to do context right should be in here somewhere. You got social, the P stands for political, religious, intellectual, technological, and economic. This is Sprite. Some teachers use Persia. When I do this, I use Spectre. I think I did that with some of the AP World kids in the last couple of years. Anyway, and this is by time period. And so here is, if you don't have anything to put for contextualization, here is just an absolute perfect place for you to get it. And that's why I gave it to you. All right, so that goes into the introduction, and then comes your lettered thesis. You can do my ABC or AB, or you can do the A-Push teacher's method. Either way is fine. Theirs is actually better than mine. As far as setting up the unicorn point, it is more complicated. The main thing you need to do is answer the question. Now, here are the three thinking skills they stressed. I know evaluate is a big one. Evaluate is whether or not this is true. You got comparison. Comparison is where you'd compare two countries. Now, here's the thing about a thesis or two empires. Let's say they said compare Protestant Christianity and Catholic Christianity. You can't just say that for a thesis, this essay will look at A, similarities, and B, differences. That's a 0, at least for the thesis, because you haven't given them a line of reason. So what they recommend you do is dig down one level lower. So you might say something like, this essay will look at the similarities and differences in the Protestant church and the Catholic church, and the similarities include, and similarities include, they both focused on Christianity and Jesus being the Son of God in the way to get to heaven, and B, differences, whereas the Catholic Church wanted their people to see the priest and the church as the source of their communication or their link to God. The Protestants left more to an individual relationship with God and the study of the Bible. Now remember, that's an ugly essay right there, and it's ugly like your ex, just like I've been saying, but that will get you the point, because that's a two-part thesis, but it's given you two arguments. So you have your similarities and your differences, and I dug down a little bit deeper. Now, when you get into the body paragraphs, you can throw all sorts of things in there. Like I said, Luther had his mind changed by the one verse that says the just shall live by faith. That should be good outside evidence. You can also say that, many of the German leaders embraced the Protestant church because they were tired of sending their money to a Catholic pope. There's plenty of other things you can use as outside evidence. Anything you've used in the thesis, you can't use later on to get credit for. You can say it again, you just won't get credit for it. So I think we have covered here the contextualization and the thesis. Now, one point I want you to really get here is these have to, first off, don't ever put your DBQ chart on something you're turning in. There's no point for that. And don't write little notes at the top of your paper and then start your essay. The top of your paper should be your introduction. And here's what I've seen a lot of kids do. They'll write their contextualization, skip a line, then put their thesis. You get no point. The thesis has to be in the introduction and or the conclusion. Readers are trained to look for it anywhere in the introductory paragraph, and then if there's not one, flip over to the back, find the conclusion, and read that. Some kids write without paragraph breaks or without indentation, and so they all fail because there's no way to figure out what the introduction and the conclusion are. It's just one big massive paper. If you don't know what indent means, just put a blank space between every paragraph. That'll work. Okay, now what you might want to do, I'm trying to make this video a little bit shorter, is you might want to do 4 or 5 sentences of contextualization. And then if you think you can go back add a little bit more later, leave a space, then write your thesis. But you dang sure better go back and fill those spaces in. I've seen kids just write a bunch of words and then cross them out. But as long as there's no empty spaces before you get to that thesis, you're fine. I don't really recommend you leaving any spaces there, but if you're a pretty good time management person, you might do that. All right, let's go on with your essay here. By the way, this is 2 points. If you do what I told you, you can get 2 points. I'm going to show you how to get 7 points in 2 paragraphs. I don't recommend this, but it can be done. All right, so here we go. And this is the thing I sent you to print. It didn't print very well on my printer, so I think it probably won't print well on yours either. I'm hoping maybe you have a separate device. Like we have several computers in our house. I would have a lot of this stuff on a separate computer, okay? Or I have Kindles, and I've done that before. I have sent documents to my Kindle or my phone, something that I'm not using to test with, so I can resource it. Printing it would be better. And what you should have are those first 3 big lectures, Unit 1, 2, and 3, in 3 separate piles, and all the Marco Learning study guides with the appropriate one. And so when you go, because a lot of this is going to come down to outside evidence. Now, so you got 2 points so far. Now, make sure you do a body paragraph. The most astonishing thing I saw in the College Board review of the DBQs they gave you was that these guys said and I had someone just do this yesterday, they sent me a DBQ where the very first body paragraph said, document 1 says, and according to them, that's no point because you're supposed to be arguing, and that's not how you argue. You say things like, as stated above, the first region is blah, blah, blah. And anyway, just make sure that you are you have a topic sentence referring back to your letters and the thesis, and then you use at least 2 documents before you get done. Anyway, I'm digressing here. That gives you the argumentation point. All right, so you got the contextualization so far in the thesis. So in this first body paragraph, if you do a topic sentence and then you talk about 2 documents, you get the 3rd point, which is the easiest point to get. I tell kids to use at least 3 sentences per document. Some kids still just write 1. And I don't know how low their standards are going to be. But if you use 2 documents in here, even probably if you use them poorly, you're going to get the point for using them. Now, if you argue them to show how they back up point A, you get a 4th point. So now we're up to contextualization thesis, using the 2 documents. I forget the word, but I'm in a hurry here. I forget the word you get if you just mention 2 documents and describe them. I think it may actually be describing 2 documents. Then you use 2 to argue. That's your 4th point. Now, let's say that 2 of these documents you do caps on or sourcing. If you do it accurately for 2 of them, you're up to 2 more points. And then what are you supposed to do at the end of every body paragraph? You're supposed to go for outside evidence. If you do that well, you get another point. Now let's count up these points. So this is if you only get 2 paragraphs done, and then the timer, tells you have to submit. A lot of kids have waited and tried to push that and had trouble submitting. So what happens is you've got your contextualization, you got your thesis. All right, contextualization, these will be points. Thesis describes 2 documents, argues with 2 documents, caps. So let me see, did I count that up? That should be 7. Oh, it's not 7, it is 6. The 7th is if you argue outside evidence, like I did earlier with the just shall live by faith. If you throw something else in there that helps you make argument A, that's again what that chart is for and what my notes are for. That would give you the 7th point. What about the 3rd paragraph? If you go into the 3rd paragraph, you've already got the point for describing the document. If you use 2 more documents, you get that extra point. And hopefully you'll do some more caps there. And remember, I don't know how many times left I'm going to be able to say this. You need to do as many caps as you can. Just throw them out, even if it's short. You need to get 2 good ones because you can only get 2 points. But do as many as you can. I want you to do it reflexively. Every time you look at an argument, you do that. So in that 3rd paragraph, if you've already got 7 points, what are the 2 points you can still get? You can argue with 2 more documents and get another argumentation point. And then if you do outside evidence, you can get additional outside evidence. So that's how you can get 7 points in 2 paragraphs. And then in the 3rd paragraph, get the 8th and the 9th. Now, I know a lot of you have emailed me about going for the unicorn point, and those of you who have, I think you can do it. Now, remember, I think you should have three paragraphs, if you can. Remember, for each of those that you do, you can get outside evidence. Now, let's talk about the conclusion. Most of you aren't going to get here, but let's talk about what you should do. You should take your thesis and say it again, but use different examples and different words. This is so that just in case you didn't do it the first time, you get it the second time. And I've had, I won't say hundreds of these, but I've had lots of kids. I've read through the introduction and they had no thesis. And I went to the conclusion and it was there. A lot of times it was in both places. It was better. The first one didn't do well enough, but the second one did. So restate it. And then here's an idea that I didn't teach you in class because most kids don't get this far. Do contextualization for what happens after this is over. Talk about what it's like today in this region. Once again, and I would like for you to write contextualization there. I would like for you to write thesis there. I'd like for you to write contextualization. But if you don't, a lot of kids are trained. I can tell you at the reading, the code for outside evidence is OE. And so every time, I told you guys to put the words outside evidence there. But if you put OE in parentheses, they know that you've got a trained AP reader teaching you. At least that's how it's done in AP world. Now, in the last couple of minutes we have left, let's go back and look at these reasoning. You're probably going to get evaluate question. You could get a compare and contrast. You could get causes. What are the causes of the Protestant Reformation? And again, you want to use 2 or 3 groups, and you want to not just say, you want them to dig down 1 level deep. So don't just say, well, because of religious issues, give them a religious issue. Because of religious issues and priest abuses. You want to go down a little bit and say, well, the priests, many of them practiced simony. The bishops practiced simony or absenteeism, or they were poorly educated. So causation, remember, you want to dig down deep in the thesis. And the third one is continuity and change. And so if they say, how did the German states stay the same and change because of the Protestant Reformation? And so in your thesis, you want to address how they stayed the same and how they changed. Anyway, I'm trying to think what else to say to you. Keep your notes out, be organized. I hope you have installed the latest version of your browser. I hope you watched that video that tested this. I know about 2/3 of you have already taken an AP exam. I'm not too worried about you. At this point, I'm going to stop the video. Good luck, people.